The Insidious Dr. Fu-Manchu, by Sax Rohmer, Chapter 5, Chapter 17. A cool breeze met us, blowing from the lower reaches of the Thames. Far behind us twinkled the dim lights of Low's cottages, the last regular habitations abutting upon the marshes. Between us and the cottages stretched half a mile of lush land, through which at this season there were, however, numerous dry paths. Before us the flats again, a dull, monotonous expanse beneath the moon, with the promise of the cool breeze that the river flowed round the bend ahead. It was very quiet. Only the sound of our footsteps, as Nayland Smith and I tramped steadily towards our goal, broke the stillness of that lonely place. Not once but many times, within the last 20 minutes, I had thought that we were ill-advised to adventure alone upon the capture of the formidable Chinese doctor, but we were following out our compact with Karamane, and one of her stipulations had been that the police must not be acquainted with her share in the matter. A light came into view far ahead of us. "That's the light, Petrie," said Smith. "If we keep that straight before us, according to our information, we shall strike the hulk." I grasped the revolver in my pocket, and the presence of the little weapon was curiously reassuring. I have endeavoured, perhaps in extenuation of my own fears, to explain how about Dr. Fu-Manchu there rested an atmosphere of horror, peculiar, unique. He was not as other men. The dread that he inspired in all with whom he came in contact, the terrors which he controlled and hurled at whomsoever cumbered his path, rendered him an object supremely sinister. I despair of conveying to those who may read this account any but the coldest conception of the man's evil power. Smith stopped suddenly and grasped my arm. We stood listening. "What?" I asked. "You heard nothing?" I shook my head. Smith was peering back over the marshes in his oddly alert way. He turned to me, and his tanned face wore a peculiar expression. "You don't think it's a trap?" he jerked. "We are trusting her blindly." Strange it may seem, but something within me rose in arms against the innuendo. "I don't," I said shortly. He nodded. We pressed on. 10 minutes' steady tramping brought us within sight of the Thames. Smith and I both had noticed how Fu-Manchu's activities centred always about the London River. Undoubtedly it was his highway, his line of communication, along which he moved his mysterious forces. The opium den off Shadwell Highway, the mansion upstream, at that hour a smouldering shell, now the hulk lying off the marshes. Always he made his headquarters upon the river. It was significant, and even if tonight's expedition should fail, this was a clue for our future guidance. "Bear to the right," directed Smith. "We must reconnoitre before making our attack." We took a path that led directly to the riverbank. Before us lay the grey expanse of water, and out upon it moved the busy shipping of the great mercantile city. But this life of the river seemed widely removed from us. The lonely spot where we stood had no kinship with human activity. Its dreariness illuminated by the brilliant moon, it looked indeed a fit setting for an act in such a drama as that wherein we played our parts. When I had lain in the East End opium den, when upon such another night as this I had looked out upon a peaceful Norfolk countryside, the same knowledge of aloofness, of utter detachment from the world of living men, had come to me. Silently, Smith stared out at the distant moving lights. "Karamane merely means a slave," he said irrelevantly. I made no comment. "There's the hulk," he added. The bank upon which we stood dipped in mud slopes to the level of the running tide. Seaward it rose higher, and by a narrow inlet, for we perceived that we were upon a kind of promontory. A rough pier showed. Beneath it was a shadowy shape in the patch of gloom, which the moon threw far out upon the softly eddying water. Only one dim light was visible amid this darkness. "That will be the cabin," said Smith. Acting upon our prearranged plan, we turned and walked up onto the staging above the hulk. A wooden ladder led out and down to the deck below, and was loosely lashed to a ring on the pier. With every motion of the tidal waters the ladder rose and fell, its rings creaking harshly against the crazy railing. "How are we going to get down without being detected?" whispered Smith. "We've got to risk it," I said grimly. Without further words my friend climbed around onto the ladder and commenced to descend. I waited until his head disappeared below the level and, clumsily enough, prepared to follow him. The hulk at that moment giving an unusually heavy heave, I stumbled, and for one breathless moment looked down upon the glittering surface streaking the darkness beneath me. My foot had slipped, and but that I had a firm grip upon the top rung, that instant, most probably, had marked the end of my share in the fight with Fu-Manchu. As it was, I had a narrow escape. I felt something slip from my hip pocket, but the weird creaking of the ladder, the groans of the labouring hulk, and the lapping of the waves about the staging drowned the sound of the splash as my revolver dropped into the river. Rather white-faced, I think, I joined Smith on the deck. He had witnessed my accident, but "We must risk it," he whispered in my ear. "We dare not turn back now." He plunged into the semi-darkness, making for the cabin, I perforce following. At the bottom of the ladder, we came fully into the light streaming out from the singular apartments at the entrance to which we found ourselves. It was fitted up as a laboratory. A glimpse I had of shelves loaded with jars and bottles, of a table strewn with scientific paraphernalia, with retorts, with tubes of extraordinary shapes holding living organisms, and with instruments, some of them of a form unknown to my experience. I saw, too, that books, papers, and rolls of parchment littered the bare wooden floor. Then Smith's voice rose above the confused sounds about me, incisive, commanding. "I have you covered, Dr. Fu-Manchu," for Fu-Manchu sat at the table. The picture that he presented at that moment is one which persistently clings in my memory. In his long yellow robe, his mask-like intellectual face bent forward amongst the riot of singular objects upon the table, his great, high brow gleaming in the light of the shaded lamp above him, and with the abnormal eyes, filmed and green, raised to us, he seemed a figure from the realms of delirium. But, most amazing circumstance of all, he and his surroundings tallied almost identically with the dream picture which had come to me as I lay chained in the cell. Some of the large jars about the place held anatomy specimens. A faint smell of opium hung in the air, and playing with the tassel of one of the cushions upon which, as upon a divan, Fu-Manchu was seated, leaped and chattered a little marmoset. That was an electric moment. I was prepared for anything except for what really happened. The doctor's wonderful evil face betrayed no hint of emotion. The lids flickered over the filmed eyes, and their greenness grew momentarily brighter and filmed over again. "Put up your hands," rapped Smith, "and attempt no tricks." His voice quivered with excitement. "The game's up, Fu-Manchu. Find something to tie him up with, Petrie." I moved forward to Smith's side and was about to pass him in the narrow doorway. The hulk moved beneath our feet like a living thing, groaning, creaking, and the water lapped about the rotten woodwork with a sound infinitely dreary. "Put up your hands," ordered Smith imperatively. Fu-Manchu slowly raised his hands, and a smile dawned upon the impassive features, a smile that had no mirth in it, only menace, revealing as it did his even, discoloured teeth, but leaving the filmed eyes inanimate, dull, inhuman. He spoke softly, sibilantly. "I would advise Dr. Petrie to glance behind him before he moves." Smith's keen grey eyes never for a moment quitted the speaker. The gleaming barrel moved not a hair's breadth. But I glanced quickly over my shoulder and stifled a cry of pure horror. A wicked, pock-marked face, with wolfish fangs bared and jaundiced eyes squinting obliquely into mine, was within 2 inches of me. A lean brown hand and arm, the great thews standing up like cords, held a crescent-shaped knife a fraction of an inch above my jugular vein. A slight movement must have dispatched me. A sweep of the fearful weapon, I doubt not, would have severed my head from my body. "Smith," I whispered hoarsely, "don't look around. For God's sake, keep him covered. But a dacoit has his knife at my throat." Then, for the first time, Smith's hand trembled, but his glance never wavered from the malignant, emotionless countenance of Dr. Fu-Manchu. He clenched his teeth hard, so that the muscles stood out prominently upon his jaw. I suppose that silence which followed my awful discovery prevailed but a few seconds. To me, those seconds were each a lingering death. There, below, in that groaning hulk, I knew more of icy terror than any of our meetings with the murder group had brought to me before, and through my brain throbbed a thought. The girl had betrayed us. "You supposed that I was alone?" suggested Fu-Manchu. So I was. Yet no trace of fear had broken through the impassive yellow mask when we had entered. But my faithful servant followed you," he added. "I thank him. The honours, Mr. Smith, are mine, I think?" Smith made no reply. I divined that he was thinking furiously. Fu-Manchu moved his hand to caress the marmoset, which had leaped playfully upon his shoulder and crouched there jibing at us in a whistling voice. "Don't stir," said Smith savagely. "I warn you," Fu-Manchu kept his hand raised. "May I ask you how you discovered my retreat?" he asked. "This hulk has been watched since dawn," lied Smith brazenly. "So?" The doctor's filmed eyes cleared for a moment. "And today you compelled me to burn a house, and you have captured one of my people too. I congratulate you. She would not betray me though lashed with scorpions." The great gleaming knife was so near to my neck that a sheet of notepaper could scarcely have been slipped between blade and vein, I think, but my heart throbbed even more wildly when I heard those words. "An impasse," said Fu-Manchu. "I have a proposal to make. I assume that you would not accept my word for anything?" "I would not," replied Smith promptly. "Therefore," pursued the Chinaman, and the occasional guttural alone marred his perfect English, "I must accept yours. Of your resources outside this cabin I know nothing. You, I take it, know as little of mine. My Burmese friend and Dr. Petrie will lead the way, then you and I will follow. We will strike out across the marsh for, say, 300 yards. You will then place your pistol on the ground, pledging me your word to leave it there. I shall further require your assurance that you will make no attempt upon me until I have retraced my steps. I and my good servant will withdraw, leaving you, at the expiration of the specified period, to act as you see fit. Is it agreed?" Smith hesitated. "Then, the dacoit must leave his knife also," he stipulated. Fu-Manchu smiled his evil smile again. "Agreed. Shall I lead the way?" "No," rapped Smith. "Petrie and the dacoit first, then you, I last." A guttural word of command from Fu-Manchu, and we left the cabin, with its evil odours, its mortuary specimens, and its strange instruments, and in the order arranged mounted to the deck. "It will be awkward on the ladder," said Fu-Manchu. "Dr. Petrie, I will accept your word to adhere to the terms." "I promise," I said, the words almost choking me. We mounted the rising and dipping ladder, all reached the pier, and strode out across the flats, the Chinaman always under close cover of Smith's revolver. Round about our feet, now leaping ahead, now gambolling back, came and went the marmoset. The dacoit, dressed solely in a dark loincloth, walked beside me, carrying his huge knife, and sometimes glancing at me with his blood-lustful eyes. Never before, I venture to say, had an autumn moon lighted such a scene in that place. "Here we part," said Fu-Manchu, and spoke another word to his follower. The man threw his knife upon the ground. "Search him, Petrie," directed Smith. "He may have a second concealed." The doctor consented, and I passed my hands over the man's scanty garments. "Now search Fu-Manchu." This also I did, and never have I experienced a similar sense of revulsion from any human being. I shuddered, as though I had touched a venomous reptile. Smith threw down his revolver. "I curse myself for an honourable fool," he said. "No one could dispute my right to shoot you dead where you stand." Knowing him as I did, I could tell from the suppressed passion in Smith's voice that only by his unhesitating acceptance of my friend's word and implicit faith in his keeping it had Dr. Fu-Manchu escaped just retribution at that moment. Fiend though he was, I admired his courage, for all this he too must have known. The doctor turned, and with the dacoit walked back. Nayland Smith's next move filled me with surprise. For just as, silently, I was thanking God for my escape, my friend began shedding his coat, collar, and waistcoat. "Pocket your valuables, and do the same," he muttered hoarsely. "We have a poor chance, but we are both fairly fit. Tonight, Petrie, we literally have to run for our lives. We live in a peaceful age, wherein it falls to the lot of few men to owe their survival to their fleetness of foot. At Smith's words I realized in a flash that such was to be our fate tonight. I have said that the hulk lay off a sort of promontory. East and west, then, we had nothing to hope for. To the south was Fu-Manchu, and even as, stripped of our heavier garments, we started to run northward, the weird signal of a dacoit rose on the night and was answered again. "3 at least," hissed Smith. 3 armed dacoits. Hopless. "Take the revolver," I cried. "Smith, it's—" "No," he rapped through clenched teeth. "A servant of the crown in the East makes his motto, 'Keep your word, though it break your neck.' I don't think we need fear it being used against us." Fu-Manchu avoids noisy methods. So back we ran, over the course by which, earlier, we had come. It was, roughly, a mile to the first building, a deserted cottage, and another 1/4 of a mile to any that was occupied. Our chance of meeting a living soul, other than Fu-Manchu's dacoits, was practically nil. At first we ran easily, for it was the second half-mile that would decide our fate. The professional murderers who pursued us ran like panthers, I knew, and I dare not allow my mind to dwell upon those yellow figures with the curved, gleaming knives. For a long time neither of us looked back. On we ran, and on, silently, doggedly. Then a hissing breath from Smith warned me what to expect. Should I, too, look back? Yes. It was impossible to resist the horrid fascination. I threw a quick glance over my shoulder, and never while I live shall I forget what I saw. 2 of the pursuing dacoits had outdistanced their fellow or fellows, and were actually within 300 yards of us. More like dreadful animals they looked than human beings, running bent forward with their faces curiously up-tilted. The brilliant moonlight gleamed upon bared teeth, as I could see, even at that distance, even in that quick, agonized glance, and it gleamed upon the crescent-shaped knives. "As hard as you can go now," panted Smith. "We must make an attempt to break into the empty cottage. Only chance." I had never in my younger days been a notable runner. For Smith I cannot speak, but I am confident that the next half-mile was done in time that would not have disgraced a crack man. Not once again did either of us look back. Yard upon yard we raced forward together. My heart seemed to be bursting. My leg muscles throbbed with pain. At last, with the empty cottage in sight, it came to that pass with me when another 3 yards looks as unattainable as 3 miles. Once I stumbled. "My God," came from Smith weakly. But I recovered myself. Bare feet pattered close upon our heels, and panting breaths told how even Fu-Manchu's bloodhounds were hard put to it by the killing pace we had made. "Smith," I whispered, "look in front. Someone." As through a red mist I had seen a dark shape detach itself from the shadows of the cottage and merge into them again. It could only be another dacoit, but Smith, not heeding, or not hearing, my faintly whispered words, crashed open the gate and hurled himself blindly at the door. It burst open before him with a resounding boom, and he pitched forward into the interior darkness. Flat upon the floor he lay, for as, with a last effort, I gained the threshold and dragged myself within, I almost fell over his recumbent body. Madly I snatched at the door. His foot held it open. I kicked the foot away and banged the door to. As I turned, the leading dacoit, his eyes starting from their sockets, his face the face of a demon, leaped wildly through the gateway. That Smith had burst the latch I felt assured, but by some divine accident my weak hands found the bolt. With the last ounce of strength spared to me, I thrust it home in the rusty socket, as a full 6 inches of shining steel split the middle panel and protruded above my head. I dropped, sprawling, beside my friend. A terrific blow shattered every pane of glass in the solitary window, and one of the grinning animal faces looked in. "Sorry, old man," whispered Smith, and his voice was barely audible. Weakly he grasped my hand. "My fault. I shouldn't have let you come." From the corner of the room where the black shadows lay flicked a long tongue of flame. Muffled, staccato came the report, and the yellow face at the window was blotted out. One wild cry, ending in a rattling gasp, told of a dacoit gone to his account. A grey figure glided past me and was silhouetted against the broken window. Again the pistol sent its message into the night, and again came the reply to tell how well and truly that message had been delivered. In the stillness, intense by sharp contrast, the sound of bare soles pattering upon the path outside stole to me. 2 runners, I thought there were, so that 4 dacoits must have been upon our trail. The room was full of pungent smoke. I staggered to my feet as the grey figure with the revolver turned towards me. Something familiar there was in that long grey garment, and now I perceived why I had thought so. It was my grey raincoat. "Caramane," I whispered, and Smith, with difficulty supporting himself upright and holding fast to the ledge beside the door, muttered something hoarsely, which sounded like "God bless her." The girl, trembling now, placed her hands upon my shoulders with that quaint, pathetic gesture, peculiarly her own. "I followed you," she said. "Did you not know I should follow you? But I had to hide because of another who was following also. I had but just reached this place when I saw you running towards me." She broke off and turned to Smith. "This is your pistol," she said naively. "I found it in your bag. Will you please take it?" He took it without a word. Perhaps he could not trust himself to speak. "Now go." "Hurry," she said. "You are not safe yet." "But you?" I asked. "You have failed," she replied. "I must go back to him. There is no other way." Strangely sick at heart for a man who has just had a miraculous escape from death, I opened the door. Coatless, dishevelled figures, my friend and I stepped out into the moonlight. Hideous under the pale rays lay the two dead men, their glazed eyes upcast to the peace of the blue heavens. Caramane had shot to kill, for both had bullets in their brains. If God ever planned a more complex nature than hers, a nature more tumultuous with conflicting passions, I cannot conceive of it. Yet her beauty was of the sweetest, and in some respects she had the heart of a child, this girl who could shoot so straight. "We must send the police tonight," said Smith. "Or the papers. Hurry," came the girl's voice commandingly from the darkness of the cottage. It was a singular situation. My very soul rebelled against it. "But what could we do? Tell us where we can communicate," began Smith. "I shall be suspected. Do you want him to kill me?" We moved away. All was very still now, and the lights glimmered faintly ahead. Not a wisp of cloud brushed the moon's disk. "Good night, Caramane," I whispered softly. Chapter 18. To pursue further the adventure on the marshes would be a task at once useless and thankless. In its actual and in its dramatic significance, it concluded with our parting from Caramane, and in that parting I learned what Shakespeare meant by sweet sorrow. There was a world, I learned, upon the confines of which I stood, a world whose very existence hitherto had been unsuspected. Not the least of the mysteries which peeped from the darkness was the mystery of the heart of Caramane. I sought to forget her. I sought to remember her. Indeed, in the latter task I found one more congenial, yet, in the direction and extent of the ideas which it engendered, one that led me to a precipice. East and West may not intermingle. As a student of world policies, as a physician, I admitted, could not deny that truth. Again, if Caramane were to be credited, she had come to Fu-Manchu a slave, had fallen into the hands of the raiders, had crossed the desert with the slave-drivers, had known the house of the slave-dealer. Could it be? With the fading of the crescent of Islam, I had thought such things to have passed. But if it were so? At the mere thought of a girl so deliciously beautiful in the brutal power of slavers, I found myself grinding my teeth, closing my eyes in a futile attempt to blot out the pictures called up. Then, at such times, I would find myself discrediting her story. Again, I would find myself wondering vaguely why such problems persistently haunted my mind. But, always, my heart had an answer. And I was a medical man who sought to build up a family practice, who, in short, a very little time ago had thought himself past the hot follies of youth and entered upon that staid phase of life wherein the daily problems of the medical profession hold absolute sway, and such seductive follies as dark eyes and red lips find no place are excluded. But it is foreign from the purpose of this plain record to enlist sympathy for the recorder. The topic upon which, here, I have ventured to touch was one fascinating enough to me. I cannot hope that it holds equal charm for any other. Let us return to that which it is my duty to narrate, and let us forget my brief digression. It is a fact, singular but true, that few Londoners know London. Under the guidance of my friend Nayland Smith, I had learned, since his return from Burma, how there are haunts in the very heart of the metropolis whose existence is unsuspected by all but the few, places unknown even to the ubiquitous copy-hunting pressman. Into a quiet thoroughfare not 2 minutes' walk from the pulsing life of Leicester Square, Smith led the way. Before a door sandwiched in between two dingy shop fronts, he paused and turned to me. "Whatever you see or hear," he cautioned, "express no surprise." A cab had dropped us at the corner. We both wore dark suits and fez caps with black silk tassels. My complexion had been artificially reduced to a shade resembling the deep tan of my friend's. He rang the bell beside the door. Almost immediately it was opened by a Negro woman, gross, hideously ugly. Smith uttered something in voluble Arabic. As a linguist, his attainments were a constant source of surprise. The jargons of the East, far and near, he spoke as his mother tongue. The woman immediately displayed the utmost servility, ushering us into an ill-lighted passage with every evidence of profound respect. Following this passage, and passing an inner door, from beyond whence proceeded bursts of discordant music, we entered a little room bare of furniture, with coarse matting for mural decorations, and a patternless red carpet on the floor. In a niche burned a common metal lamp. The negress left us, and close upon her departure entered a very aged man with a long patriarchal beard, who greeted my friend with dignified courtesy. Following a brief conversation, the aged Arab, for such he appeared to be, drew aside a strip of matting, revealing a dark recess. Placing his finger upon his lips, he silently invited us to enter. We did so, and the mat was dropped behind us. The sounds of crude music were now much plainer, and as Smith slipped a little shutter aside, I gave a start of surprise. Beyond lay a fairly large apartment, having divans or low seats around 3 of its walls. These divans were occupied by a motley company of Turks, Egyptians, Greeks, and others, and I noted 2 Chinese. Most of them smoked cigarettes, and some were drinking. A girl was performing a sinuous dance upon the square carpet, occupying the center of the floor, accompanied by a young Negro woman upon a guitar, and by several members of the assembly who clapped their hands to the music or hummed a low, monotonous melody. Shortly after our entrance into the passage, the dance terminated, and the dancer fled through a curtained door at the farther end of the room. A buzz of conversation arose. It is a sort of combined wekele and place of entertainment for a certain class of Oriental residents in, or visiting, London, Smith whispered. The old gentleman who has just left us is the proprietor, or host. I have been here before on several occasions, but have always drawn blank. He was peering out eagerly into the strange clubroom. "Whom do you expect to find here?" I asked. "It is a recognized meeting place," said Smith in my ear. "It is almost a certainty that some of the Fu-Manchu group use it at times." Curiously, I surveyed all these faces which were visible from the spy hole. My eyes rested particularly upon the 2 Chinamen. "Do you recognize anyone?" I whispered. Shh. Smith was craning his neck so as to command a sight of the doorway. He obstructed my view, and only by his tense attitude and some subtle wave of excitement which he communicated to me did I know that a new arrival was entering. The hum of conversation died away, and in the ensuing silence I heard the rustle of draperies. The newcomer was a woman, then. Fearful of making any noise, I yet managed to get my eyes to the level of the shutter. A woman in an elegant, flame-coloured opera cloak was crossing the floor and coming in the direction of the spot where we were concealed. She wore a soft silk scarf about her head, a fold partly draped across her face. A momentary view I had of her, and wildly incongruous, she looked in that place, and she had disappeared from sight, having approached someone invisible who sat upon the divan immediately beneath our point of vantage. From the way in which the company gazed towards her, I divined that she was no habituée of the place, but that her presence there was as greatly surprising to those in the room as it was to me. Whom could she be, this elegant lady who visited such a haunt, who, it would seem, was so anxious to disguise her identity, but who was dressed for a society function rather than for a midnight expedition of so unusual a character? I began a whispered question, but Smith tugged at my arm to silence me. His excitement was intense. Had his keener powers enabled him to recognize the unknown? A faint but most peculiar perfume stole to my nostrils, a perfume which seemed to contain the very soul of Eastern mystery. Only one woman known to me used that perfume. Karamane. Then it was she. At last my friend's vigilance had been rewarded. Eagerly I bent forward. Smith literally quivered in anticipation of a discovery. Again the strange perfume was wafted to our hiding-place, and, glancing neither to right nor left, I saw Karamane, for that it was she I no longer doubted. recross the room and disappear. "The man she spoke to," hissed Smith. "We must see him. We must have him." He pulled the mat aside and stepped out into the anteroom. It was empty. Down the passage he led, and we were almost come to the door of the big room when it was thrown open, and a man came rapidly out, opened the street door before Smith could reach him, and was gone, slamming it fast. I can swear that we were not 4 seconds behind him, but when we gained the street it was empty. Our quarry had disappeared as if by magic. A big car was just turning the corner towards Leicester Square. "That is the girl," rapped Smith, "but where in heaven's name is the man to whom she brought the message? I would give £100 to know what business is afoot. To think that we have had such an opportunity and have thrown it away." Angry and nonplussed, he stood at the corner, looking in the direction of the crowded thoroughfare into which the car had been driven, tugging at the lobe of his ear, as was his habit in such moments of perplexity, and sharply clicking his teeth together. I, too, was very thoughtful. Clues were few enough in those days of our war with that giant antagonist. The mere thought that our trifling error of judgment tonight in tarrying a moment too long might mean the victory of Fu-Manchu, might mean the turning of the balance which a wise providence had adjusted between the white and yellow races, was appalling. To Smith and me, who knew something of the secret influences at work to overthrow the Indian Empire, to place, it might be, the whole of Europe and America beneath an Eastern rule, it seemed that a great yellow hand was stretched out over London. Dr. Fu-Manchu was a menace to the civilized world. Yet his very existence remained unsuspected by the millions whose fate he sought to command. "Into what dark scheme have we had a glimpse?" said Smith. "What state secret is to be filched? What faithful servant of the British Raj to be spirited away? Upon whom now has Fu-Manchu set his death seal?" Caramane on this occasion may not have been acting as an emissary of the doctor's. I feel assured that she was, Petrie. Of the many whom this yellow cloud may at any moment envelop, to which one did her message refer? The man's instructions were urgent. Witness his hasty departure. Curse it! He dashed his right clenched fist into the palm of his left hand. I never had a glimpse of his face, first to last. To think of the hours I have spent in that place, in anticipation of just such a meeting, only to bungle the opportunity when it arose. Scarce heeding what course we followed, we had come now to Piccadilly Circus and had walked out into the heart of the night's traffic. I just dragged Smith aside in time to save him from the off-front wheel of a big Mercedes. Then the traffic was blocked, and we found ourselves dangerously penned in amidst the press of vehicles. Somehow we extricated ourselves, jeered at by taxi drivers who naturally took us for 2 simple Oriental visitors, and just before that impassable barrier, the arm of a London policeman was lowered, and the stream moved on. A faint breath of perfume became perceptible to me. The cabs and cars about us were actually beginning to move again, and there was nothing for it but a hasty retreat to the curb. I could not pause to glance behind, but instinctively I knew that someone who used that rare, fragrant essence, was leaning from the window of the car. "Andaman second," floated a soft whisper. We gained the pavement as the pent-up traffic roared upon its way. Smith had not noticed the perfume worn by the unseen occupant of the car, had not detected the whispered words. But I had no reason to doubt my senses, and I knew beyond question that Fu-Manchu's lovely slave, Caramane, had been within a yard of us, had recognized us, and had uttered those words for our guidance. On regaining my rooms, we devoted a whole hour to considering what Andaman second could possibly mean. "Hang it all," cried Smith. "It might mean anything. The result of a race, for instance." He burst into one of his rare laughs, and began to stuff broad-cut mixture into his briar. I could see that he had no intention of turning in. "I can think of no one of note in London at present, upon whom it is likely that Fu-Manchu would make an attempt," he said, "except ourselves." We began methodically to go through the long list of names which we had compiled, and to review our elaborate notes. When, at last, I turned in, the night had given place to a new day. But sleep evaded me, and Andaman second danced like a mocking phantom through my brain. Then I heard the telephone bell. I heard Smith speaking. A minute afterwards, he was in my room, his face very grim. I knew as well as if I'd seen it with my own eyes that some black business was afoot last night, he said. And it was. Within pistol shot of us, someone has got at Frank Norris West. Inspector Weymouth has just been on the phone. Norris West, I cried, the American aviator and inventor of the West Aero torpedo. Yes. He's been offering it to the English War Office, and they have delayed too long. I got out of bed. What do you mean? I mean that the potentialities have attracted the attention of Dr. Fu-Manchu. Those words operated electrically. I do not know how long I was in dressing, how long a time elapsed ere the cab for which Smith had phoned arrived, how many precious minutes were lost upon the journey, but, in a nervous whirl, these things slipped into the past, like the telegraph poles seen from the window of an express, and, still in that tense state, we came upon the scene of this newest outrage. Mr. Norris West, whose lean, stoic face had latterly figured so often in the daily press, lay upon the floor in the little entrance hall of his chambers, flat upon his back, with the telephone receiver in his hand. The outer door had been forced by the police. They had had to remove a piece of the panelling to get at the bolt. A medical man was leaning over the recumbent figure in the striped pyjama suit, and Detective Inspector Weymouth stood watching him as Smith and I entered. "He has been heavily drugged," said the doctor, sniffing at West's lips, "but I cannot say what drug has been used. It isn't chloroform or anything of that nature. He can safely be left to sleep it off, I think." I agreed, after a brief examination. "It's most extraordinary," said Weymouth. "He rang up the yard about an hour ago, and said his chambers had been invaded by Chinamen. Then the man at the phone plainly heard him fall. When we got here, his front door was bolted, as you've seen, and the windows are 3 floors up. Nothing is disturbed. The plans of the aero torpedo?" rapped Smith. "I take it they are in the safe in his bedroom," replied the detective, "and that is locked all right. I think he must have taken an overdose of something and had illusions. But in case there was anything in what he mumbled, you could hardly understand him. I thought it as well to send for you." "Quite right," said Smith rapidly. His eyes shone like steel. "Lay him on the bed, Inspector." It was done, and my friend walked into the bedroom. Save that the bed was disordered, showing that West had been sleeping in it, there were no evidences of the extraordinary invasion mentioned by the drugged man. It was a small room. The chambers were of that kind which are let furnished and very neat. A safe with a combination lock stood in a corner. The window was open about a foot at the top. Smith tried the safe and found it fast. He stood for a moment clicking his teeth together, by which I knew him to be perplexed. He walked over to the window and threw it up. We both looked out. "You see," came Weymouth's voice, "it is altogether too far from the court below for our cunning Chinese friends to have fixed a ladder with one of their bamboo rod arrangements. And, even if they could get up there, it's too far down from the roof. 2 more stories for them to have fixed it from there." Smith nodded thoughtfully, at the same time trying the strength of an iron bar which ran from side to side of the window-sill. Suddenly he stooped with a sharp exclamation. Bending over his shoulder, I saw what it was that had attracted his attention. Clearly imprinted upon the dust-coated grey stone of the sill was a confused series of marks. Tracks, call them what you will. Smith straightened himself and turned a wondering look upon me. "What is it, Petrie?" he said amazedly. "Some kind of bird has been here, and recently." Inspector Weymouth in turn examined the marks. "I never saw bird tracks like these, Mr. Smith," he muttered. Smith was tugging at the lobe of his ear. "No," he returned reflectively. "Come to think of it, neither did I." He twisted around, looking at the man on the bed. "Do you think it was all an illusion?" asked the detective. "What about those marks on the window-sill?" jerked Smith. He began restlessly pacing about the room, sometimes stopping before the locked safe and frequently glancing at Norris West. Suddenly he walked out and briefly examined the other apartments, only to return again to the bedroom. "Petrie," he said, "we are losing valuable time. West must be aroused." Inspector Weymouth stared. Smith turned to me impatiently. The doctor summoned by the police had gone. "Is there no means of arousing him, Petrie?" he said. "Doubtless," I replied. "He could be revived if one but knew what drug he had taken." My friend began his restless pacing again, and suddenly pounced upon a little file of tabloids which had been hidden behind some books on a shelf near the bed. He uttered a triumphant exclamation. "See what we have here, Petrie," he directed, handing the file to me. "It bears no label." I crushed one of the tabloids in my palm and applied my tongue to the powder. "Some preparation of chloral hydrate," I pronounced. "A sleeping draught?" suggested Smith eagerly. "We might try," I said, and scribbled a formula upon a leaf of my notebook. I asked Weymouth to send the man who accompanied him to call up the nearest chemist and procure the antidote. During the man's absence, Smith stood contemplating the unconscious inventor, a peculiar expression upon his bronzed face. "And a man second," he muttered. "Shall we find the key to the riddle here, I wonder?" Inspector Weymouth, who had concluded, I think, that the mysterious telephone call was due to mental aberration on the part of Norris West, was gnawing at his moustache impatiently when his assistant returned. I administered the powerful restorative, and although, as later transpired, chloral was not responsible for West's condition, the antidote operated successfully. Norris West struggled into a sitting position and looked about him with haggard eyes. The Chinamen," he muttered. He sprang to his feet, glaring wildly at Smith and me, reeled, and almost fell. "It is all right," I said, supporting him. "I'm a doctor. You have been unwell." "Have the police come?" he burst out. "The safe. Try the safe." "It's all right," said Inspector Weymouth. "The safe is locked. Unless someone else knows the combination, there's nothing to worry about." "No one else knows it," said West, and staggered unsteadily to the safe. Clearly his mind was in a dazed condition, but, setting his jaw with a curious expression of grim determination, he collected his thoughts and opened the safe. He bent down, looking in. In some way the knowledge came to me that the curtain was about to rise on a new and surprising act in the Fu-Manchu drama. "God," he whispered, "we could scarcely hear him. The plans are gone." Chapter 19. I have never seen a man quite so surprised as Inspector Weymouth. "This is absolutely incredible," he said. "There's only one door to your chambers. We found it bolted from the inside." "Yes," groaned West, pressing his hand to his forehead. "I bolted it myself at 11 o'clock when I came in. No human being could climb up or down to your windows. The plans of the aerotorpedo were inside a safe." "I put them there myself," said West, "on returning from the War Office, and I had occasion to consult them after I had come in and bolted the door. I returned them to the safe and locked it. That it was still locked, you saw for yourselves, and no one else in the world knows the combination." "But the plans have gone," said Weymouth. "It's magic. How was it done? What happened last night, sir? What did you mean when you rang us up?" Smith, during this colloquy, was pacing rapidly up and down the room. He turned abruptly to the aviator. "Every fact you can remember, Mr. West, please," he said tersely, "and be as brief as you possibly can." "I came in, as I said," explained West, "about 11 o'clock, and having made some notes relating to an interview arranged for this morning, I locked the plans in the safe and turned in." "There was no one hidden anywhere in your chambers," snapped Smith. "There was not," replied West. I looked. "I invariably do." Almost immediately, I went to sleep. "How many chloral tabloids did you take?" I interrupted. Norris West turned to me with a slow smile. "You're cute, Doctor," he said. "I took 2. It's a bad habit, but I can't sleep without. They are specially made up for me by a firm in Philadelphia. How long sleep lasted, when it became filled with uncanny dreams, and when those dreams merged into reality, I do not know, I suppose. But out of the dreamless void a face came to me, closer, and peered into mine. I was in that curious condition wherein one knows that one is dreaming and seeks to awaken to escape. But a nightmare-like oppression held me. So I must lie and gaze into the seared yellow face that hung over me, for it would drop so close that I could trace the cicatrized scar running from the left ear to the corner of the mouth and drawing up the lip like the lip of a snarling cur. I could look into the malignant, jaundiced eyes. I could hear the dim whispering of the distorted mouth, whispering that seemed to counsel something evil. That whispering intimacy was indescribably repulsive. Then the wicked yellow face would be withdrawn and would recede until it became as a pin's head in the darkness far above me, almost like a glutinous liquid thing. Somehow I got upon my feet, or dreamed I did. God knows where dreaming ended and reality began. Gentlemen, maybe you'll conclude I went mad last night, but as I stood holding onto the bedrail, I heard the blood throbbing through my arteries with a noise like a screw propeller. I started laughing. The laughter issued from my lips with a shrill whistling sound that pierced me with physical pain and seemed to wake the echoes of the whole block. I thought myself I was going mad, and I tried to command my will to break the power of the chloral, for I concluded that I had accidentally taken an overdose. Then the walls of my bedroom started to recede, till at last I stood holding onto a bed which had shrunk to the size of a doll's cot in the middle of a room like Trafalgar Square. That window yonder was such a long way off I could scarcely see it, but I could just detect a Chinaman, the owner of the evil yellow face creeping through it. He was followed by another who was enormously tall, so tall that, as they came towards me, and it seemed to take them something like half an hour to cross this incredible apartment in my dream, the second Chinaman seemed to tower over me like a cypress tree. I looked up to his face, his wicked, hairless face. "Mr. Smith, whatever age I live to, I'll never forget that face I saw last night, or did I see it? God knows. The pointed chin, the great dome of a forehead, and the eyes heavens above, the huge green eyes." He shook like a sick man, and I glanced at Smith significantly. Inspector Weymouth was stroking his moustache, and his mingled expression of incredulity and curiosity was singular to behold. "The pumping of my blood," continued West, "seemed to be bursting my body. The room kept expanding and contracting. One time the ceiling would be pressing down on my head, and the Chinamen, sometimes I thought there were 2 of them, sometimes 20, became dwarfs. The next instant it shot up like the roof of a cathedral. "Can I be awake?" I whispered, "or am I dreaming?" My whisper went sweeping in windy echoes about the walls, and was lost in the shadowy distances up under the invisible roof. "You are dreaming." "Yes." It was the Chinaman with the green eyes who was addressing me, and the words that he uttered appeared to occupy an immeasurable time in the utterance. But at will I can render the subjective objective. "I don't think I can have dreamed those singular words, gentlemen." And then he fixed the green eyes upon me, the blazing green eyes. I made no attempt to move. They seemed to be draining me of something vital, bleeding me of every drop of mental power. The whole nightmare room grew green, and I felt that I was being absorbed into its greenness. I can see what you think. And even in my delirium, if it was delirium, I thought the same. Now comes the climax of my experience, my vision. I don't know what to call it. I saw some words issuing from my own mouth. Inspector Weymouth coughed discreetly. Smith whisked round upon him. "This will be outside your experience, Inspector, I know," he said. "But Mr. Norris West's statement does not surprise me in the least. I know to what the experience was due." Weymouth stared incredulously, but a dawning perception of the truth was come to me too. How I saw a sound I just won't attempt to explain. I simply tell you I saw it. Somehow I knew I had betrayed myself, given something away. "You gave away the secret of the lock combination," rapped Smith. "Eh?" grunted Weymouth. But West went on hoarsely. "Just before the blank came a name flashed before my eyes. It was Bayard Taylor." At that I interrupted West. "I understand," I cried. "I understand. Another name has just occurred to me, Mr. West, that of the Frenchman Moreau." "You have solved the mystery," said Smith. It was natural Mr. West should have thought of the American traveller Bayard Taylor, though. Moreau's book is purely scientific. He has probably never read it. "I fought with the stupor that was overcoming me," continued West, striving to associate that vaguely familiar name with the fantastic things through which I moved. It seemed to me that the room was empty again. I made for the hall, for the telephone. I could scarcely drag my feet along. It seemed to take me half an hour to get there. I remember calling up Scotland Yard, and I remember no more. There was a short, tense interval. In some respects I was nonplussed, but frankly, I think Inspector Weymouth considered West insane. Smith, his hands locked behind his back, stared out of the window. "Andaman 2nd, he said suddenly. "Weymouth, when is the first train to Tilbury?" 5:22 from Fenchurch Street, replied the Scotland Yard man promptly. "Too late," rapped my friend. "Jump in a taxi and pick up 2 good men to leave for China at once. Then go and charter a special to Tilbury to leave in 25 minutes. Order another cab to wait outside for me." Weymouth was palpably amazed, but Smith's tone was imperative. The inspector departed hastily. I stared at Smith, not comprehending what prompted this singular course. "Now that you can think clearly, Mr. West," he said, "of what does your experience remind you?" "The errors of perception regarding time, the idea of seeing a sound, the illusion that the room alternately increased and diminished in size, your fit of laughter, and the recollection of the name Bayard Taylor. Since evidently you are familiar with that author's work, The Land of the Saracen, is it not? These symptoms of the attack should be familiar, I think." Norris West pressed his hands to his evidently aching head. "Bayard Taylor's book," he said dully. "Yes, I know of what my brain sought to remind me, Taylor's account of his experience under hashish. Mr. Smith, someone doped me with hashish." Smith nodded grimly. "Cannabis indica," I said. "Indian hemp. That is what you were drugged with. I have no doubt that now you experience a feeling of nausea and intense thirst, with aching in the muscles, particularly the deltoid. I think you must have taken at least 15 grains." Smith stopped his perambulations immediately in front of West, looking into his dulled eyes. "Someone visited your chambers last night," he said slowly, "and for your chloral tabloids substituted some containing hashish, or perhaps not pure hashish. Fu-Manchu is a profound chemist." Norris West started. "Someone substituted," he began. "Exactly," said Smith, looking at him keenly. "Someone who was here yesterday. Have you any idea whom it could have been?" West hesitated. "I had a visitor in the afternoon," he said, seemingly speaking the words unwillingly. "But—" "A lady?" jerked Smith. "I suggest that it was a lady." West nodded. "You're quite right," he admitted. "I don't know how you arrived at the conclusion, but a lady whose acquaintance I made recently, a foreign lady." "Kadamane," snapped Smith. "I don't know what you mean in the least, but she came here, knowing this to be my present address, to ask me to protect her from a mysterious man who had followed her right from Charing Cross. She said he was down in the lobby, and naturally I asked her to wait here whilst I went and sent him about his business." He laughed shortly. "I am over-old," he said, "to be guyed by a woman. You spoke just now of someone called Fu-Manchu. Is that the crook I'm indebted to for the loss of my plans? I've had attempts made by agents of 2 European governments, but a Chinaman is a novelty." "This Chinaman," Smith assured him, "is the greatest novelty of his age." "You recognize your symptoms now from Bayard Taylor's account?" "Mr. West's statement," I said, "ran closely parallel with portions of Moreau's book on hashish hallucinations. Only Fu-Manchu, I think, would have thought of employing Indian hemp. I doubt, though, if it was pure cannabis indica. At any rate, it acted as an opiate." "And drugged Mr. West," interrupted Smith, "sufficiently to enable Fu-Manchu to enter unobserved, whilst it produced symptoms which rendered him an easy subject for the doctor's influence. It is difficult in this case to separate hallucination from reality, but I think, Mr. West, that Fu-Manchu must have exercised an hypnotic influence upon your drugged brain. We have evidence that he dragged from you the secret of the combination." "God knows we have," said West. "But who is this Fu-Manchu, and how, in the name of wonder, did he get into my chambers?" Smith pulled out his watch. "That," he said rapidly, "I cannot delay to explain if I'm to intercept the man who has the plans. Come along, Petrie, we must be at Tilbury within the hour. There is just a bare chance." Chapter 20. It was with my mind in a condition of unique perplexity that I hurried with Nayland Smith into the cab which waited and dashed off through the streets in which the busy life of London just stirred into being. I suppose I need not say that I could penetrate no farther into this, Fu-Manchu's latest plot, than the drugging of Norris West with hashish. Of his having been so drugged with Indian hemp, that is, converted temporarily into a maniac, would have been evident to any medical man who had heard his statement and noted the distressing after-effects which conclusively pointed to Indian hemp poisoning. Knowing something of the Chinese doctor's powers, I could understand that he might have extracted from West the secret of the combination by sheer force of will, whilst the American was under the influence of the drug. But I could not understand how Fu-Manchu had gained access to locked chambers on the 3rd story of a building. "Smith," I said, "those bird tracks on the windowsill. They furnish the key to a mystery which is puzzling me." "They do," said Smith, glancing impatiently at his watch. "Consult your memories of Dr. Fu-Manchu's habits, especially your memories of his pets." I reviewed in my mind the creatures gruesome and terrible which surrounded the Chinaman, the scorpions, the bacteria, the noxious things which were the weapons wherewith he visited death upon whomsoever opposed the establishment of a potential yellow empire. But no one of them could account for the imprints upon the dust of West's windowsill. "You puzzle me, Smith," I confessed. "There is much in this extraordinary case that puzzles me. I can think of nothing to account for the marks." "Have you thought of Fu-Manchu's marmoset?" asked Smith. "The monkey," I cried. "They were the footprints of a small ape," my friend continued. "For a moment I was deceived as you were, and believed them to be the tracks of a large bird. But I have seen the footprints of apes before now, and a marmoset, though an American variety, I believe, is not unlike some of the apes of Burma." "I am still in the dark," I said. "It is pure hypothesis," continued Smith, "but here is the theory. In lieu of a better one, it covers the facts. The marmoset, and it is contrary from the character of Fu-Manchu to keep any creature for mere amusement, is trained to perform certain duties. You observed the waterspout running up beside the window. You observed the iron bar intended to prevent a window cleaner from falling out. For an ape, the climb from the court below to the sill above was a simple one. He carried a cord, probably attached to his body. He climbed onto the sill, over the bar, and climbed down again. By means of this cord, a rope was pulled up over the bar. By means of the rope, one of those ladders of silk and bamboo. One of the doctor's servants ascended, probably to ascertain if the hashish had acted successfully. That was the yellow dream face which West saw bending over him. Then followed the doctor, and to his giant will, the drugged brain of West was a pliant instrument which he bent to his own ends. The court would be deserted at that hour of the night, and, in any event, directly after the ascent, the ladder probably was pulled up, only to be lowered again when West had revealed the secret of his own safe and Fu-Manchu had secured the plans. The reclosing of the safe and the removing of the hashish tabloids, leaving no clue beyond the delirious ravings of a drug slave, for so anyone unacquainted with the East must have construed West's story, is particularly characteristic. His own tabloids were returned, of course. The sparing of his life alone is a refinement of art which points to a past master. "Karamane was the decoy again," I said shortly. "Lee. Hers was the task to ascertain West's habits and to substitute the tabloids. She it was who waited in the luxurious car, infinitely less likely to attract attention at that hour in that place than a modest taxi, and received the stolen plans. She did her work well. Poor Karamane, she had no alternative. I said I would have given £100 for a sight of the messenger's face, the man to whom she handed them. I would give 1,000 now. Andaman. Second, I said. What did she mean? Then it has not dawned upon you, cried Smith excitedly as the cab turned into the station. The Andaman, of the Oriental Navigation Company's line, leaves Tilbury with the next tide for China ports. Our man is a second-class passenger. I am wiring to delay her departure, and the special should get us to the docks inside of 40 minutes. Very vividly, I can reconstruct in my mind that dash to the docks through the early autumn morning. My friend being invested with extraordinary powers from the highest authorities, by Inspector Weymouth's instructions, the line had been cleared all the way. Something of the tremendous importance of Nayland Smith's mission came home to me as we hurried on to the platform, escorted by the station-master and the 5 of us. For Weymouth had 2 other CID men with him, took our seats in the special. Off we went on top speed, roaring through stations, where a glimpse might be had of wondering officials upon the platforms, for a special train was a novelty on the line. All ordinary traffic arrangements were held up until we had passed through, and we reached Tilbury in time, which I doubt not constituted a record. There at the docks was the great liner, delayed in her passage to the Far East by the will of my royally empowered companion. It was novel and infinitely exciting. "Mr. Commissioner Nayland Smith," said the captain interrogatively when we were shown into his room, and looked from one to another and back to the telegraph form which he held in his hand. "The same, Captain," said my friend briskly. "I shall not detain you a moment. I am instructing the authorities at all ports east of Suez to apprehend one of your second-class passengers should he leave the ship. He is in possession of plans which practically belong to the British government. Why not arrest him now? Asked the seaman bluntly. Because I don't know him. All second-class passengers' baggage will be searched as they land. I am hoping something from that, if all else fails. But I want you privately to instruct your stewards to watch any passenger of Oriental nationality, and to cooperate with the 2 Scotland Yard men who are joining you for the voyage. I look to you to recover these plans, Captain. I will do my best, the captain assured him. Then, from amid the heterogeneous group on the dockside, we were watching the liner depart, and Nayland Smith's expression was a very singular one. Inspector Weymouth stood with us, a badly puzzled man. Then occurred the extraordinary incident which to this day remains inexplicable, for, clearly heard by all 3 of us, a guttural voice said, "Another victory for China, Mr. Nayland Smith." I turned, as though I had been stung. Smith turned also. My eyes passed from face to face of the group about us. None was familiar. No one apparently had moved away. But the voice was the voice of Dr. Fu-Manchu. As I write of it now, I can appreciate the difference between that happening as it appealed to us, and as it must appeal to you who merely read of it. It is beyond my powers to convey the sense of the uncanny which the episode created. Yet, even as I think of it, I feel again, though in lesser degree, the chill which seemed to creep through my veins that day. From my brief history of the wonderful and evil man who once walked, by the way unsuspected, in the midst of the people of England, near whom you personally may at some time unwittingly have been. I am aware that much must be omitted. I have no space for lengthy examinations of the many points, but ill-illuminated with which it is dotted. This incident of the docks is but one such point. Another is the singular vision which appeared to me whilst I lay in the cellar of the house near Windsor. It has since struck me that it possessed peculiarities akin to those of a hashish hallucination. Can it be that we were drugged on that occasion with Indian hemp? Cannabis indica is a treacherous narcotic, as every medical man knows full well, but Fu-Manchu's knowledge of the drug was far in advance of our slow science. West's experience proved so much. I may have neglected opportunities. Later, you shall judge if I did so, opportunities to glean for the West some of the strange knowledge of the secret East. Perhaps, at a future time, I may rectify my errors. Perhaps that wisdom, the wisdom stored up by Fu-Manchu, is lost forever. There is, however, at least a bare possibility of its survival, in part, and I do not wholly despair of one day publishing a scientific sequel to this record of our dealings with the Chinese doctors.